So we are on Daf Lamed Daled 34. Where did we get up to? Okay, we're up to Ikadam, right? I believe. Which is about 8 lines down on 34A, about 10 lines down. Ikadam, so yesterday we had a Mishnah that that Rava explained. How is it that what we're dealing with is that a shomer chinam who makes a shvua that something can make a shvua that something was stolen from him or lost, and he doesn't have to pay. But if he prefers not to take the shvua and says he's going to pay, he can do that. And if he does so, then he is entitled to the kefel, or the arba chamisha. If it turns out that we catch the thief and it's proven that he stole and he has to pay kefel, that's a knas, he has to pay double, it's a fine. So the fine then belongs to the shomer who paid for the item. And why is that? Because at the time it was stolen, it belonged to the original owner. So why does the fine go to the shomer? So we said because we assume that the owner, at the time that he received payment, in gratitude or recognition of the efforts of the shomer, whatever he said, he effectively, we assume that he tells him, or that he intends for any future knas to go to the shomer now that he has paid for it. So Ikadam, right? Another explanation. And why is that? Yeah, so Ikadam, another explanation for why this should be. That Amar Rava, Nasa Ka'omer Lo, it's like as if he said, Likashet Higane V'tirsai Shalmeni, that it's like the owner at the time that they make the deal for the shmirah, that he hands it over to him to look after. It's like he says, if it should get stolen and you decide that you're going to pay me for it, samuch lignivasa knuyalach. I'm now under those circumstances. If those circumstances occur, I am now making it so that I'm transferring ownership to you at the time of payment. No, sorry, not at the time of payment. At the time, just before it is stolen. And that's how the shomer receives the ownership, and that's also why how you can explain why the gizos, any profit from the animal, like shearings or it has offspring, has children, calves. Do they still go to the owner, because any improvements or any profit made from that animal before it was stolen at that time still belonged to the owner, and the owner is only transferring ownership just before the theft. Now, what's the difference between these two ways of understanding it? Ika binayu kusha drabi zera. According to the second explanation we just said, whether there's a question about the xerosuflatus, right, as I just explained. So according to the explanation we had yesterday, the gizosuflatus can belong to, it seems questionable why they would belong to the original owner, and we had to kind of propose a questionable assertion to make that work. According to today's explanation, it's quite obvious that any improvements or any payros, gizos uvlados, at the time that those were produced, that still belong to the owner under today's scheme. Another difference is dekaima ba'agam. When the animal at the time that it was stolen, it was in like a swamp. It was out in the field, basically. So there was no way to affect a kinyan, right? So if you're handing over the animal and we're saying that this was your intention, then that kinyan is effective. But if the deal is made while the animal is out in the field, then there's no kinyan that was made. So that would make a difference as to no, sorry, at the time that it was stolen, it was out in the field. So if you're trying to say that the kinyan took place just before the theft, well, what if neither of them had access to the animal at the time? That wouldn't work. Okay, moving on. Shilem or Shava. So this idea that if the shomer pays, and because he doesn't want to swear, then he gets the kefil paid to him.
What difference does it make where the animal is? If the animal is stolen from the person has a deed, let's say, on the animal. The animal, what difference does it make if it's in the barn, in the house, in the field, on the moon? The animal.
Because we're trying to establish when did this kind of privilege or ownership, if you like, this privilege of collecting the knas, when did that get transferred and how did it get transferred? So if I just say something to you, there's no kinyan there, right? We're dealing with, it's not actual property, but it's something of value, right? So if we're dealing with something of value, there needs to be some kind of kinyan. Right. So if it takes place at the time that I hand the animal over to you for shmirah, so there a kinyan is made, you take the animal, right? But if you're saying the this is all the kinyan is going to take place at the time that just before it's stolen, and it's not on your property at that time, right? It's out in the fields, out in a public property, public domain. Then where's the kinyan? Right?
Well, if does this person have to touch the animal to make it a kinyan? Does it have to
Well,
see the animal? I mean, if you own something, you transfer it by a deed, you sign it over, then
no,
the
first
kinyan
of all,
takes place, right?
right. So the kinyan can be made just by it being on your property or by moving it, carrying it, leading it, etc. if it's an animal. Okay, but just being on your property is enough of a kinyan. Right. So if I bring my cow over to your farm and I say, look after this cow for me, and we have all these implied conditions, then the kinyan takes place at that time because the cow is on your property. Right. But if the cow at the time of the transfer of this asset, the cow is out wandering around in the desert, right? Then where's the kinyan? Okay.
I hear you, but I mean, I, I, I mean, I would think you can make a kinyan, sign a document, a paper. Why do you have to have the animal in front of you?
Well, first of all, we're talking about implied kinyan, right? So we're assuming that the owner would have said or intended the following when he handed over the animal. So there's no document going to be signed here, right? It's not like we're saying that the Mishnah is only the case where, they write out all these conditions or they verbalize these conditions. That's not what the Mishnah is saying. The Mishnah or the Gemara is saying that we're assuming that this is every shomer, every owner's intention. And that's why we made this rule. Okay, but there still has to be a mechanism for the kinyan to take place because I'm actually transferring you this asset of being able to collect the potential knas. Right now, how do I transfer that? Right. So if I transfer it along with giving you the cow on your property and you're kona it that way, right? But if I try to give it to you while the cow is out in the desert, right, out grazing somewhere, and it's not on your property, and there's no document here because we're just talking about a verbal deal, right? Where you say to me, look after my cow, and I say, okay, right? And it's not on my property. It's not there to be taken. I don't take it into my possession on your behalf. Then there's no active kinyan.
Uh-huh.
Okay. I mean, you're right that, if there were some kind of a document or whatever, or there are many ways to make a kinyan, sure. Um, but actually, I'm not even sure the document qualifies. But yeah, there are many ways
I
to
was
make a
going to say, I
kinyan, but
don't
we're
think a
trying to.
we know that transferring money doesn't work. I don't think a
Right.
document works.
Right. Yeah, you're right. But there are many ways to make a kinyan. But we're trying to reconcile this Mishnah with the idea that there's an assumption that the owner intended this when he handed it over to you, right? But if he never had actually handed it over to you, then like there's no mechanism for a kinyan.
All right.
Okay. So Amar Rav Chia bar Abba Amar Rav Yochanan, Rav Chia says, Lo shileim sheleim mamish. So when we say that the shomer pays and then he acquires the right to the knas, the future knas, doesn't mean he actually paid. Elokevin shomer hareini mishalim, when he announced his intention to pay, afo hishlo shileim. Even if he didn't pay yet, he still acquires that right. Tanan, but the Gemara objects. We have our Mishnah. Shileim v'lo shava. If he paid and didn't want to swear, shileim mean lo shileim lo. It sounds like he actually paid, right? So where do you get this idea that if he only stated his intention to pay? You know, Seifus, the Gemara says, look at the end of the Mishnah. Nishbav lo ratzal shalim. If he swore and didn't want to pay, right? Talmud lo ratza. Here it's mentioning wanting to pay. So by using that phrase haratza, but if he wanted to pay, then it sounds like afal pishlo shilim. But that would be enough to affect the transfer of ownership of this knas. So you can't tell from the language of the Mishnah. If Rav Yochanan is correct. Tani Kvasid Rav Yochanan, but here's a support for Rav Yochanan. It's another brisa. Hasocher par mechavero. If you rent a cow from somebody, v'nignava, and it gets stolen, v'yamar halaw, and then the shomer says, Hareini mishalim ve'eni nishba, I'm going to pay, and I won't take a shvua. V'achar kach nimsa ganav, and then the thief is found. Right, Mishalim Tashlei Kefel La Socher. He pays the knas to the renter. Right now, it's a little strange because this is not the case of a shomer chinam. This is the case of a socher, a renter, and a renter actually has to pay for a case, is responsible for nignavo avda, for when the animal is stolen or lost. But what we're talking about here is apparently you make a shvua that, oh, some accident happened that I'm not responsible for, then you would be off the hook. But if you decide rather than take that shvua, you want to pay for it, you acquire the knas, the potential knas. If it turns out that, it turns out it was stolen. So, Amar of Papa, Shomer Chinam came Shomer Pashati, a Shomer Chinam, once he says, I was negligent in looking after this thing, and that's why it got lost or stolen. Maknele Kfela, he acquires it's the same like paying for it, right? Once he says I was negligent, so he's responsible now for paying for the item, because he didn't fulfill his shmira. So in that case, Maknele Kfela, he acquires the knas. Why? If he wanted to, Pater Nafshi B'Gneva, he could have said, oh, it was stolen, but it wasn't my fault, right? And he could have taken that shvua and been off the hook. Now, shomer sachar, keva shomer nignava, if a renter, it's not a renter, a shomer sachar, a paid watchman says it was stolen, Maknelek Fela, he also acquires the double payment. He could have taken a shvua that he's not responsible because it just dropped dead or it broke, not accidentally. It wasn't his fault. A person who borrows, who has the maximum liability, if he says, I'm going to pay and not take a shvua, lo makni lake fela, he doesn't acquire the kefil. So, why? Because because he doesn't have an option for a shvua, says the Gemara. Like, what's he going to swear? He's responsible for just about everything that happens to it. So, no matter what he swears to, he's still responsible. So he doesn't acquire. He doesn't pay, he pays, but he doesn't acquire the knas. Mark proposes, well, maybe what about, couldn't the shoel take a shvua that it died in the, as a regular, this is the only out for a shoel, right? The only way that a shoel is not responsible is mesa machmas malacha, that it dies in the course of doing its regular work, right? So why doesn't if he takes a shvua, if he could take a shvua about that, then maybe that is his out. So Gemara answers, that's a very unusual circumstance. We're not going to say that the Shoel could have made this shvua because it's so unusual that, I don't know if we're thinking it wouldn't occur to him or it just seems very suspicious, but nobody's going to take that shvua unless it were true. Ikadam, right? Um, or some say, Amar of Papa, Nami came and Shomarini Mishalim, Maknelik Fela. No, some say no, that we do assume that he could have taken the Shua, the body Pater Nashe, Mesamach Maslacha. He could have taken the Shua that that it died and it wasn't in such a way that he's not responsible. So therefore he is if he says, okay, I'm going to pay you for it, he acquires the kefil. I'm like Ravid, so Ravid says, Hachim Abai, it was what Abai says, Shoel Ad Sheyashalim. Now, in the case of the borrower, it's not like everybody else where we say, as soon as you say you're going to pay, then you acquire the knas. In the case of a Shoel, that's not the case. In the case of Shoel, we wait until you actually pay up, and then you acquire the future knas. My time, why? Since the whole he gets all the hana of the borrowing the thing, he gets all the use of it. But dibura lo matni lekfela. So remember we said that the way that this takes place is that the original owner gives him, we assume that he gives him that he has goodwill towards him, towards the watchman, because the watchman, at least he was either looking after it for him for pay or not for pay, or in the case of a socher, he was paying him to use it, right? So he has some goodwill there, and so we assume that he would say, look, if this happens and there's ever a fine and you've already paid me, or you said you're going to pay me, then you get the benefit of the fine, right? But the shoel, he doesn't have any goodwill towards the shoel. Right, the shoel gets all the benefit of this arrangement. So therefore, it's only actually after he actually pays that the owner would say, "Fine, you've paid me for it. It's good. Thank you very much. You paid me for the item. It's now yours, and I am also giving you rights to any future knas." Tani Kosid Rav Zvid. We have a support for Rav Zvid. Hashol par mechavero, Brisa says you borrow a cow, v'nignavan, it's stolen. V'kidam hashol v'shilem, and the borrower steps up and pays. V'achar kach nimsa ganav, and then the thief is found. Mishalem testimony kefil la shoel. The thief pays the knas to the shoel, to the borrower. And it's specifically he actually paid. So only after he pays, according to this Brisa, does it appear that he gets the knas. Relation to Rav Papa. According to the first version of Rav Papa's opinion, where he says that you can't say that, oh, I could have taken a shvua to get me off the hook. Vaday lo havet yufta. The Brisa isn't a problem. But Lishna Basra, according to the second version of Rav Papa, lema tevet yufta. Maybe it contradicts Rav Papa, because in the second version, Rav Papa says Ad Sheyashalim, right? Well, Rav Papa says no. Mi'alima mi'asnisim. The Bryce is no stronger than the Mishnah. The Ktani Shilem, right? The Mishnah also said Shilem, but we already knocked that down. We already said you can't really infer from the language of the Mishnah that it means specifically when he actually pays. We assume it could mean when he says he's going to pay. Avokimna biyamar, we say that it means really when he agrees to pay. So here too, our brisa don't be so specific. Maybe it's not being so specific. So the brisa says midame. Well, how can you compare the brisa to the Mishnah? The brisa actually says he goes ahead and pays, right? So by using that language, it sounds like it really means that he's actually paying. The Mishnah didn't say that. So Gemara answers, my kidem, what does it mean he went ahead and paid? Kidem v'amar means he went ahead and said he would pay. Like that's not the Papa doesn't buy it. That means that he really paid. It means he was forthright, or he advanced, he came right along and said he was going to pay, is just as a reasonable explanation of that brisa. Aminak tane gabe socher v'amar. Now the Gabishal Kidem, but the Gemara is not still objects because the Brisa changes the language, right? When it comes to the Socher, Brisa said he paid, and when it comes to the shoel, it's he came ahead, he went ahead and paid. So there's a different language used. So doesn't that imply that the case of the shoel is different in that he's actually paid? It only works when he's actually paid. Shmamina dafka katane. So doesn't that mean that the Brisa, it knows what it's doing, and by specifically using that language, it's introducing a difference between the shoel and the socher? My answer is midei gabe hadade tanya. But these are two different brises, right? Like you're taking two different brises and trying to infer the different language in the two cases implies something, but they're not. They're two different brises. So one is said in this, using this expression, one is said using that expression. You can't make any inferences from that. They asked the Tanaim at Rav Chia and Rav Oshios, but they said that no, these two brises were taught together. So in that case, if they were taught as one teaching, then the difference in language does indeed imply that that the case of the shoel is different, that he only acquires the knas, the future knas, once he actually pays. Okay. Shita, it's obvious. Amar any mishalim, that if the shomer says, I'm not going to pay, v'chazavi amar any mishalim, then he says, oh, you know what? Change my mind. I am going to pay. I don't want to take the shvua. Then, that should work. Like, what does it matter what he said before? If he now says, I'm going to pay, that qualifies as acquiring the future knas. But if he did the other way around, he says, I'm going to pay, and then he changes his mind and says, no, I changed my mind. I'm not going to pay. I'm going to take the shvua. And then you suddenly the thief is caught and there's a knas, right? So he hasn't paid yet. He originally said he's going to pay, so he should have acquired the knas. But then he changed his mind and he said, "No, I'm not going to pay." So we should go. What's the deal? Do we say that since he changed his mind, he took back the offer to pay, that he forfeits his right to the knas? Maybe. Maybe he really intends to pay. He's like putting it off. He's like, I can't pay you today, right? I don't have the funds right now. So when the guy comes to collect, he's like, oh, I'm not paying. He means I'm not paying today, but maybe he still stands by his original commitment to pay eventually. Another question. We're going to have a bunch of questions here, and spoiler alert, they're all going to end with teku, they're unresolved. Amar Harini Mishalim. What if he says, I'm going to pay, umes, and then he dies, hasn't paid yet? The heirs say, we're not paying. What about that? Are they changing their minds? Are they going back on their father's commitment? Maybe they are going to stand by that commitment. They just don't have the money yet. What if the estate of the shomer pays for the pays for the item? In other words, there was no saying that I'm going to pay, but the estate goes ahead and pays for it. What about that? Can the owner say, okay, I felt like I had goodwill towards your father, and that's why I might have given him the rights to the knas, but I don't have any goodwill towards you. So maybe that maybe the knas that came into your possession really still belongs to me, because it was never given to you. It was never given to you, right? I would have given it to your father, but I'm not giving it to you. Or maybe Loshna, maybe there's no difference. That if he has gratitude towards the father, he would still give this thing to the estate. Shilim Labanim, what if the owner dies and the shomer pays to the estate of the owner? What about that? Like our father had gratitude towards you, the shomer, So that's, fine. So he would have given you the knas, but we don't have any gratitude towards you. Well, we don't have any gratitude towards you, so we're not giving you the kefel. Or maybe no difference. Maybe we assume that this is the same. What about you have both of the shomer and the owner died, and we're dealing with the estates. What about that? The same question. What's the halacha? And what about shile mechza? What if the shomer says, you know what, I'm going to pay half of the value of the of the thing in question? What about that? Does he get half of the kefa or the arba chamisha? Shol shtei paros, or if you borrowed 2 cows, and they're both of them are stolen with shile machas mehan, and you decide you're going to take a shvu on one of them and pay for the other one, right? What about that? Do we assume that? Do we say that you're the one cow that you're paying for? Is that the same as half of the whole package, or is that cow you're paying for? So you acquire the kefil on behalf of that cow. Show me that shit. What if you borrow from partners? And you pay one guy, right? His share. What about that? Who does the kefil belong to then? Shutvin shashalu, or if partners borrowed something from one guy, and one of the partners pays up his share of the loss. So what about that? Show me the isha. What if you borrow from a woman, and you pay the husband, right? Really, you should pay the woman. Now, the husband has an interest in the item, right? He can use it while they're married, but it really belongs to the woman. So if you pay the husband, what about that? Isha shashala, or a woman borrows something for the purposes of her own property. She's like, I don't know, she borrows something that has to do with her property. The shilem bala, and her husband pays on her behalf. What about that? Take all these things remain undecided. Okay. Amar Huna. Mashbin also shvua she'ena birshusa. So we've said that you can get out of a shvua by paying. And what is that shvua? You would ordinarily have to take a shvua that this, if you're a shomer chinam, that this thing was stolen or lost, so I'm off the hook, right? If you decide to pay, Rav Huna says you still have to take a shvua. What's the shvua? She'ena birshusa. You have to take a shvua even though you're paying that you don't have the object. Okay, my tama, why? We're concerned that maybe what happened was you borrowed this thing, right? You really like it. You don't want to give it back. Not you borrowed it, but you're looking after it for somebody. You're a shomer chinam. You're looking after it, and you take a liking to it, and you're like, I really want this thing, so I'm gonna say I don't mind paying for it, but the guy's not going to sell it to me. It's some kind of unique object. So you cook up this story that it was stolen. You pay for it because you don't want to take a shvua, and you're happy to pay for the thing, and then you keep it, right? So in order to deter people from doing that, we make you take a shvua. We make you take a shvua of that you don't have the object in your possession. Meisvei. So Gemara asks a question on this. Say you lend something with collateral, right? The collateral gets lost, right? Sell it. So somebody's responsible for the collateral, right? The Amarlo, sell of the loan was a seller, shekel hayashava. But you know what? The collateral wasn't worth that much. The collateral was only worth half. It was only worth a shekel. So you owe me a shekel. Loki, not so. Ella seller he'll be sani love you. The loan was a seller. The collateral was the full collateral, was worth a seller. Potter. Then there's no shvua required, because there's not any admission of liability here. Now, he'll be sicha alav. What if I lent you a seller, shekel hayashava, and it was worth a it was worth that, and the collateral was only worth a shekel. That's now lost. Follow him, but the borrower says, Loki, not so. It was worth 3 dinar, like 3/4 of the thing. So I only owe you the difference, right? The 1 dinar chayev. Then you have to take a shvuah that's what it was worth. Because this is a mode of a mixas, right? This is you're admitting part of the liability that's being proposed by the other guy. So but mode of a mixas, you always take a shvuah. Selahil visani alav. Third case, the borrower says, you lent me a sella, and Beis Hayashava, the collateral I gave you was worth double, 2 sellas, right? So now you owe me a sella because you lost the collateral. And the lender says, Loki, not sell, sella visicha, love sella yashava. No, the thing you gave me was only worth 1 sella. So we're even. A potter, then there's no shvuah required. But last case, Sela Hilvisania love. The borrower says, you lent me a sella, Shnaim Ayashav, and it was worth 2 sellas. The collateral was worth 2 sellas, so you owe me a sella. Follow him there. And the lender says, Loki, no, Ela Sela Hilvisicha love. Yeah, the loan was a sella. Hey dinar Hayashava, but it was worth 5 dinar, right? So I only owe you 1 dinar, which is, the sella loan is covered by 4 of the dinarim in the collateral. Now I admit that it was worth a little more, so I'll pay you back that little more. So chayav, then he has to take a shvuah. Now minishba, who makes the shvuah? Misha bikadon etzlo, the one who had the lender who is holding the collateral, right? Why do we, like, either one of them could take a shvuah, right? It's a disputed case. So how do you know who takes the shvuah? So we're saying the lender takes the shvuah, the guy who is holding the collateral. Because what if we have the borrower take the shvuah, right? And then the lender pulls it out of his pocket, tricked you, you took a false shvuah. I was just baiting you, but here's the item. So what's interesting here, because we're not that much concerned about truth in this case, right? Because, like, why would we care? So the guy is a criminal. He takes a false shvuah, but there's a public policy element here too. Not only do we want to maintain the kind of the sacredness of the shvuah, right? We don't want people to get inured to taking shvuahs, or to thinking, listen, everybody, lots of people make false shvuahs, right? We don't want that to be the thing. Also, there are other consequences, like a person who takes a false shvuah is, for example, pasul edus. He can't be a witness. So we don't. For public policy reasons, we don't want to disqualify more people from being witnesses. Therefore, we'll have the other guy take the shvuah, because we're not concerned that the borrower, like, where's he going to get the thing from, right? He can't pull it out of his pocket. It was in the possession of the lender, right? So it's the lender that might pull it out of his pocket and prove that the shvuah was false. Therefore, we have him take the shvuah.
Well, what's he taking the shvuah on, the collateral or the object?
On the value of the collateral, right? They're discussing, like, look, everybody agrees that the loan was made and there was collateral, and now the collateral has been stolen, right? So, but the question is, what was the value of the collateral? It's not here anymore for us to assess. So if it had been assessed and there was, documentation what it was worth, then we don't have a problem, right? But here, it's unclear what the value of the collateral was, and they're disputing that. So that's where there could be a shvuah. How much was that collateral worth, right? And we have the lender take a shvuah that this is how much it was worth. Okay. So we said minishva, who takes the shvuah? It's the lender. Now wait a minute. We had 4 cases in the Mishnah. which one is it talking about? Ilema Seifa. If we're talking about the end of the Mishnah where they're claiming that possibly the item is valued at more than the loan, and so the lender now owes money to the borrower because he lost an item that was more valuable than the loan. But typically, the Shvua Gabi Malvahi, then then it's obvious that the lender would have to take the shua, the hakamode makes a satana, because in that case, it's the borrower who's making the demand, saying, "I gave you a more valuable thing and you lost it. Now you owe me money," right? And so he's making the demand, and the lender is denying the demand, right? Or he's only admitting to part of it. He's a motive and mitzvah. So obviously there's a shua. So why is there even a question, Minishma, who takes a shua? So it must be that we're talking about when we say who takes the shua and we answer the lender. It's Allah Shmuel. Aresha, we're talking about the beginning of the Mishnah. My Aresha, what part of the Resha? Like, the first case of the Mishnah, like there's no one has to swear, right? The first case of the Mishnah was what? That they're not disputing. Hold on a second. Oh yeah, there's no shvua in the first case of the Mishnah, right? The first case of the Mishnah was they're disputing over how much less it was worth, whether it was worth less, and there's no motive that makes us. So there's no shvua. So it must be the second case, a seifa the Resha. The end of the first half of the Mishnah, which was the lender claims I lent you a selah and shekel hayashava, but the collateral was only worth a shekel. No, it wasn't worth a shekel; it was worth 3 dinar. Right. So then it's a mother mixas chayav. The borrower has to swear the shvua gavi lovahi, because the lova, the borrower, is really the one who should take the shvua, because he's admitting to part of the claim. But the rabbi said, switch it and let the lender take the shvua. For the same reason that Rav Huna stated before, which was that we're concerned that he'll take the shvua and then the other guy will pull the thing out of his pocket and say, "Ha, I tricked you," and it turns out to be a false shvua. Okay, so now the Gemara embarks on the question. So if it's correct, what Rav Huna said was correct. Once the malva makes the shvua, like if it's the lender that's taking the shvua and the lender who is holding the item, like he's only going to be proving himself wrong. There's no concern that he's going to take the shvua and then take the pocket out of his pocket and say, "I tricked myself." That's ridiculous, right? It's only when he's trying to trap the other guy, right? So where's the concern what's the point of the concern in this brisa that the lender is going to pull it out of his pocket? Well, he can't take it out of his pocket. Okay, so I'm actually going to leave you in suspense, because we now embark on a series of 4 or 5 ways to explain this, and I will leave this for David to cover tomorrow.
So what was the last point here?
The last point is
a little confusing. He doesn't have it either.
Right. So we were assuming what's the reason. Rav Huna's rule is what? That we switch. We determine who is the one to make the shvua. What's the reasoning behind it? The reasoning is that we shouldn't give the opportunity for the other guy, create a situation where the other guy can pull it out of his pocket and say, "Haha, that must have been a false shvua," right?
Right, false. He tricked.
But in this case of the brisa, right? Where we're saying we're going to take the shvua, which should have been made by the lova, because he's the one that's modav b'miktsas, right? He's the one that's making a partial admission, but we're going to say, no, let's have the malva, the lender, take the shvua. But why? Like, if the reasoning is that the guy who takes the shvua will now come up with the object, the malva is the guy who has the opportunity to have, hidden the item away and not take it out of his pocket. So it's not like he's going to prove the other guy wrong. If we give the shvua to the malva, he'd only be proving himself wrong. And there's certainly no concern that somebody's going to take a shvua and turn around and say, haha, that was a false shvua, right? That's only when there's two adversaries. One takes the shvua and the other has the ability to prove him wrong, right? But if we're transferring, and the Brisa is transferring the shvua from the lova to the malva, from the borrower to the lender, right? Like the lender doesn't, we're not concerned that the lender would be able to prove the shvua wrong because it's his shvua, right? The reason only makes sense when the guy who is not suspected of having the item is not the same guy who takes the shvua. But that reason doesn't apply to the case where the guy who's taking the shvua is the guy who potentially might have the item in his possession. Remember, we're talking about collateral here, right? The malva, the lender, is the guy who holds the collateral, right? So he's the one that we could reasonably suspect is squirreling this item away somewhere, and not admitting to it. Okay,
Right.
So if the other guy takes the shvua, then he might pull it out of his pocket and say, you were lying, right? But if he's taking the shvua, what possible scenario is there that he would then take it out of his pocket and say, I was lying?
But he wanted to trick the borrower, right?
Yeah, but if the lender is the one that's taking the shvua, what trick is there? What benefit is there from him proving that his own shvua was false?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Makes no sense.
He gets
Clear. Thank you.
all right.
Okay,
Yashar
leave that to David to resolve tomorrow.
Okay.
Try to get some sleep. Okay. Have a good day, everybody.
You too. Bye-bye.
Right.